I have published, other than this book, about 2 haikus in the last 10 years. So I figure I'm doing about 3.5 syllables a year. So as you can tell, I'll be reading older stuff. John created this book almost by himself. He proposed it to Porcupine's Quill, did all of the work, making the selections from my previous books. And well, yeah, I'm basically trying to follow my little line here, my little teleprompter, which I've taped to my computer. So I will be forgetting much. I will read 6 or 7 poems from the book, depending on time. But since the poems span nearly half a century, I thought I would read something older than that first. Bear with me, it will make sense eventually. This is by Tristan Tzara, a recipe for making poems that he wrote in 1920. It's been translated as How to Make a Dadaist Poem, but that should be a Dada poem because the Dadas did not want the ist attached to them. To make a Dada poem, take a newspaper, take a pair of scissors, choose an article as long as you are planning to make your poem. Cut out the article, then cut out each of the words that make up this article and put them in a bag. Shake it gently. Then take out the scraps one after the other in the order in which they left the bag. Copy conscientiously. The poem will resemble you. And here are you, a writer infinitely original and endowed with a sensibility that is charming, though beyond the understanding of the vulgar. Now, I read you that because John has done something quite similar, although he has not used chant so much as his genius at poetry. He's taken one of my poems, taken each of the words and rearranged them, not using any other words. And he has created something that resembles not him, but me, which is kind of a strange coincidence. I'll read you my poem first. It's called Seascape with Donkey, from Closer to Home, Rick Books, 1997. Seascape with Donkey. Horsetails in the air, on the water, rooster tails, and no horses and no roosters. Somewhere must be the tail of a donkey and a tailless donkey pinned to a wall, 2-dimensional. Imagine a real likeness of a donkey, real pins, a solid wall. Anything can be pinned to it. An oyster catcher whistling that flies into fog and is gone, or a freighter that blows its own horn and slides out of this world, or the brain itself grasping these details, holding on. How one part connects with another or fails to connect. Maybe I'm the donkey, always needing to be reattached to the same 2 or 3 things on the earth or the air or the water. Now here's John's much smarter poem, using my terrific words, of course. Donkey brain. Gone the three-dimensional world, the two. In the fog, a donkey on its own. No, always another donkey on a freighter, maybe a likeness. This seascape of earth, of air, of water itself, with roosters and horses. Details imagine anything. The pins pinned reel to reel, wall to wall, solid to same. That connects that, slides or fails. The oyster catcher flies out on water and somewhere a horn blows, whistling an air, these horse tails and rooster tails. No, connect to the donkey into how I'm grasping or holding or needing. It must be a and or can be the donkey, be one and or two. A donkey with a tail reattached, things pinned to a part. Or is the brain tailless? Thank you, John, and thank you for not giving me permission to read it because I didn't ask. I'm now going to go back to 1974 and a prose poem from my second book, Snowscapes. The book had no title. I just used an asterisk to signify a snowflake. Eva, my late wife, features in most of these poems. I'm not going to read all the sort of louder, noisier love poems, although I'm really glad that Terry, that you read my favorite of those. The ones I'll be reading tonight are more where there's a slight imbalance and there's usually a couple which sort of resemble the two of us trying to create the balance again. From Snowscapes. He sleeps on top of the sheet, she sleeps under, both covered by a quilt of interlocking hexagons knit of virgin wool and sewn together with a white thread. Each dreams nightly in color. They know because even though they dream mostly of snow and of snow figures, the latter cast in the dream a distinct blue shadow they distinctly remember. Frequently, his dreams feature snowmen with carrots for noses, which really means he assumes come morning the raptures of childhood. She is less precise in her dreams as in their telling, sensing rather a pink husk, warm and soft, from a time before sheets. Rarely while dreaming they touch, separated only by the thin sheets their bodies have, each from its own side warmed. Then it is as if an orange object he recalls clearly were making contact with a pink tissue she guesses always, touching without merging like snowflakes that retain their identity for all their falling. On such mornings, they are secretly glad for their parallel, if not entirely equal dreams, glad for the blanket that keeps them equally warm. When Porcupine's Quill decided on this series of essential poets, they decided to use an etching of flowers from a book by Pierre-Joseph Redouté that first appeared in Les Liliacées, Paris, 1805. I was asked what flower I would like, and my immediate reaction was skunk cabbage, but he didn't have any of those. But I had written some poems featuring an amaryllis, which this one has two of. At Christmas, a good friend of mine gave me another one that had 8 flowers on it. The one that I actually wrote this poem about was presented to me in Lisbon on a sabbatical there, way back when, in the mid-'80s. This is from Heat Waves by Ulican Books, if I can find the page. The amaryllis sounds reveille, and the air hums electric all day without overheating. A rooster in the neighbor's yard, confused by all the blue light cast by trees in our orchard, sounds the alarm from nightfall till dawn. You also fit into this picture somehow, turning a spherical dream over in your hands without waking, drawing lines on its surface as if it were a globe and you had somewhere to go. As always, I play the part you expect me to play, saying warm, warmer, hot, because the words have always served to steer you in a direction you could not fault. But now, like you, I have no goals. We watch the apples burn up on their branches. We listen to the rooster crow, and that seems enough. I'm not sure where the poems come from. This one features Sibelius, who is not really high on my hit parade of composers, although I do listen to him sometimes. I do crosswords, so it may be that he appeared in there. There's a drug in here called Sibelium, which neither my wife nor I have ever used. So there you are. PK Page once actually had me help her read a poem about Sibelius. I think I played the part of God, and just as I read my first line, the telephone rang at Hawthorne Books. What that has to do with anything, I don't know, so I'll just read crosswords, also from Heat Waves. Crosswords. Sibelius, she says, the Finnish composer, which he did not need to know at 8 in the morning, the letters of the name a major key to the puzzle, and who knows, the fact may prove useful again. The echo of the church bells keeps taking a shortcut through his head, as does her definition of some invisible ache or some other of which he is the most likely cause. Funny, she says, I read Sibelius when the label on the package says Sibelium, medicine for dizzy spells, whatever centers in the inner ear, bells, the bells. He tries to imagine himself listening, hammer, anvil, stirrup, to the bells, clappers and bells, and the voice for the rest of his life, working out answers to all the questions she could ever pose, shouting in triumph at the paper's crossword bested daily. Facts never more than factual, dates, places of birth, marriage, and death, the intimate voices say for string quartet. The ache remains invisible, spreading from one of them to the other, assuming its forms, impossible to pin down in 7 or 8 letters exactly. Sibelius, she says. Sibelium, she says, until he listens and her balance returns. She puts her glasses on to study possible side effects of the medicine, the music. Some things refuse to fit into language. Churches, he says, should haul down their bells, give it a rest. A silence, she says, in music, 4 letters, thank you.
That was lovely.
Thank you. Now we're skipping ahead in terms of books all the way to 2002 from a poem from Dead Man's Float, Brick Books. This one started in Puerto Escondido, Mexico. Eva and I were on yet another sabbatical. It seems that I only took sabbaticals at UVic. They lent us their wonderful cliff top casa, and behind it, down many, many stairs, was a wonderful little beach, except it had very dangerous rocks and usually a very powerful swell. And my wife was a way better swimmer than me. She could crawl, she could breaststroke past me when I was doing my best crawl. But on this one day, she was not feeling well, and I was out far in the water exploring whatever there was to explore. And she suddenly waved at me. She was in some kind of trouble. So that's the story. I don't know whether it has anything to do with the poem. Pulling in from the rocks. Having fooled you, the tide keeps you drifting toward the rocks with its barnacles, coral, sea urchins, and me swimming minutes away with my clumsy fins. In a controlled panic, you call, just loud and hard enough to suggest some urgency, not so much that I panic too. Cramp? Sharks in the water? Jellyfish sting? My amplified feet get me to you in time, get us both slowly away from the rocks. Relax. Put your mask in the water and float. Let me do the work for a while, for once. Something about this feels like a reversal. Usually I'm the one who is drifting, now closer, now farther away, and never toward nor away from anything so solid as rock. You're the one who nudges me ahead or pulls me back in. Relax, relax for once and see, for all your hard-earned doubts, it's still working.
Lovely.
There are some poets like Tim Lilliburn, Jan Zwicky, Robert Bringhurst, who do big philosophy in their poems. Whenever I try anything remotely resembling metaphysics, I'm always down ground level where the insects are. So this poem. This morning, hanging by a thread, Spiders shook in their webs, caterpillars inside their tents. They hung on threads heading slowly earthward from them. The sun appeared as if created for nothing but to show off the monarch's wing. Moonlight then just for moths, we wondered. At breakfast, the wasps seemed stickier than usual, confused or irritated by our presence, maybe groggy like us in the heat. Carnivores, they ignored butter and jam conspicuously and went straight for the meat, all too attached to its sinew and fat. How seldom, you said, do we think things through to the end? The insects made us think again, follow their thread right down to the ground, down to soil and grass, where lowly crane flies first begin to err, through the brief inevitability of their lives, unthinking, thinking neither happy nor unhappy. And if I'd ever used the word inevitability in a poem in my creative writing 100 classes, I think my students would have shot me. And at that time, I would have agreed. I'll close with the last poem in the book, from Dead Man's Float, 2002 Brick Books. I've read this once before. I think it was on a website, but I will do it anyway. Was it for you, Yvonne? I can't remember. An ideal place. Footnote.
He's holding up a postcard. I'm just doing a description for those who don't have the video.
Yeah. This is a cenote, which is a cave or a well in a place called Actun Chen, near Playa del Carmen, Mexico. Aoife and I went there. It has stalactites and stalagmites, and at the very bottom, it has crystal clear cold water with actually not very many fish in it, but it's crystal clear. When you look up, occasionally you see a little bit of light. Might be a hole through the surface, and everywhere there are roots coming straight down. They look more like electric cables than roots, but they're heading for the water at the very bottom of the cave. Aoife was claustrophobic, but she was convinced to go into this cave because she was always looking for patterns for her paintings in the stalagmites, etc. So anyway, that's the background. An ideal place. In this cave, no one needs to drag his shadow up the wall toward an elusive sun. No allegorical marker marks how far we keep falling short of it. Slow water dissolves slow limestone and crystallizes where once shellfish had worked on their shells. Time, wherever it was, has dropped out of the space-time continuum. Inconsolable bats flap their wings, vanish back into the stalactite mysteries, of which in this timelessness we think we know a thing or two. Faces, men, women, totemic animals, armies marching on cities, trumpets raised, towers rising, walls collapsing, the angelic, the earth, the imagined taking root, even as real roots drop through nothing down to clear water. We have forgotten almost everything we have read of Plato, and here that does not trouble us. The small light far ahead guides us well enough. Up there, the protected species endure. Snakes with their innocent poisons fall from the palms onto the necks of innocent creatures in a natural cycle into which we must surely fit. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Derk.
Wonderful.
Yes, you said that